Welcome to the July exclusive. This exclusive is a special extended edition, mainly because of some of the conversations that I've been having with the learning and development community over the last month or so. And I know that of the folks on the call today, I am not alone in the conversations that I've had. And that is around job application processes that are evolving in previous years with the changes that are happening in organizations with AI and things like that. There are a lot of things that have always been challenging about applying for jobs. I think that in the last year or two, that has become incredibly exacerbated, if you will, in the challenges that folks are experiencing. So, today's exclusive was inspired by a conversation that I had with a colleague who reached out to me and asked, is it possible to use Build Capable XCL to share my portfolio when I'm applying for jobs? So instead of putting my e-learning sample or my storyboard into, I don't know, a Google Drive or Dropbox or something like that, could I put it into XCL and share it? And is that a good strategy? And I said, yes. And not just because it's an easy way to share it with potential employers, but also because you can track and see whether they've seen it. And so, one of the things that I think is really interesting about what we're going to talk about today is that there's a lot of tracking that goes on with our data. And when you're applying for a job, it can be very challenging and also, just frankly, it can be demoralizing because you have a lot of folks that are not calling you back. You don't know if anybody's even looked at your application. You're being ghosted, things like that. These are things that we can talk about the ethics of this, and we can talk about how awful this is for quite some time. What I'd like to focus on today is, could you track back your effectiveness in your job application process? How many folks are actually looking at your portfolio? If someone does look at your portfolio and review it, how much are they looking at? Are they just opening and closing it? Did they actually go through your whole project? This type of data can really help you prepare for an interview. It could help you prepare for a call with a potential employer. So I'd love today to spend a little bit of time talking with some of my colleagues that have joined the call today to talk about building a portfolio. And then we'll talk a little bit about what does it look like to host that in XCL. So we'll do a little demo to show you how you might set up your portfolio. And then at the end of today's session, I am going to share a little resource download with you that is some curated resources from the community. I reached out to some folks and said, hey, do you have any good resources for folks who are actively looking for jobs, building portfolios? Had some really great input from the community, so I will be sharing that out with you all as well. I got some stuff from Kara North, JD Dillon, Megan Torrance, Josh Cavalier, Jeff Bad, who's on the call today, even Maestro Learning. Maestro sent us a coupon for one of their art classes. So there's some cool things that are available in that resource download too. All right, what do you say we get started, folks? I'm going to introduce who's on the call today. So you have me, and you also have Rob Christie, your dynamic duo here all the time. But we also have Sean Putman, who will be here today talking a little bit about portfolios and hiring process. Brian Dusablon is joining us today to talk a little bit about some technical things and putting together portfolios and older projects. Jeff Bad is joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about making decisions around vibe coding your portfolio. That's something that I've gotten a lot of questions about over the last year or so. Jacob Wood is joining us today. I imagine we'll have a couple of things around accessibility and thinking about providing easier access to portfolios. And then there's some folks on the call that if you have questions and things as we go, that you've come to the session today that you'd love to have answered or maybe talk about with the community, we're going to open that up as well. So, special extended session. This session will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel after we're done today with accurate captions and a transcript. So, let's get started. I want to kick us off with a question. And this is around just creating a portfolio. What do you think is the most important thing about creating a portfolio? You're applying for jobs. Is it even important? Why do we even need a portfolio? Anyone want to kick us off with this question? Why is a portfolio important and what is important about it? What should we think about?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Yes, I think it's extremely important. I can say hiring in the last few years, it's been one of the things that differentiates people from others. It gets to see how you work, your decision-making process, not just, again, depending on role, can you develop something, but really how do you get to those decisions? Which sort of leads to your second question of what's important. And to me personally, it's great to see how someone may use a tool to develop something. What I'm more interested in, especially if I'm looking for someone that's going to be doing some instructional design, is I want to see what their decision-making process is. Why did you go about this? What were you trying to achieve? What, say it's an interaction type or a design decision, what led to that? What was your thinking behind it? And how did that support the final outcome that you were trying to get to? I think those things are critical and really do set you apart from others that may be applying for the same job.
And Sean, I think this context is important. What are the types of roles that you've hired for, let's just say in the last 5 years, and at what companies?
Yeah, a couple technology companies. The last one was for a trucking safety company that I worked for, and we were looking for a designer slash developer. So we were looking for someone that could do that and a development piece. Prior to that, it was for a software company, and we were looking for someone who was could make the design decisions, but a little bit more of the developer role and really looking for someone that could dig into that development side and work with our instructional designers to develop what they produced.
And so, as a hiring manager, what is your process like? Talk to us about that side of it. When you get these things, you get these portfolios and applications, how many are you
Right.
getting and how are you sorting through that stuff?
Yeah, that certainly has changed over the last 5 years. The last one that I hired for, I want to say after 5 days, we were somewhere around 14 or 1500 resumes that came in for it. I actually had to close it so that we weren't getting more. And I know we've all heard the ATS horror stories, and I wish I could say that it's not like that, but it is. We're having to pare down with keywords, look for the ones that have portfolios versus the ones that don't. Unfortunately, in the situation I was in, that was a critical piece for it. I saw some great looking resumes, but without being able to confirm, yeah, okay, it's not just words on paper. These are things that they actually did. They're able to talk about it. Unfortunately, the resumes without portfolios, I think tend to fall down in the shuffle a bit.
Yeah. And so I agree. Well, I know one of the things that Sean and I talked about before today's call, when we were prepping for today's session, is that even no matter what role it was in. So I've worked in global health. I've worked in at CarMax. I worked at a software company. I like all of the places that I've worked, when I was reviewing hundreds, thousands of resumes, the way that I would scale things down first is I would figure out what can I easily eliminate people for. So when hiring managers are looking at applications, they aren't looking for the fit first. They're looking for what to get rid of first. Because before you can look for what you want, you have to get rid of what you don't because there's too much volume. So when you're going through as a hiring manager, you have to sort out, okay, typos, doesn't have a portfolio, job history's weird. I'm looking for what can I get rid of to narrow down the pool to the best candidates, which means that if you have an error on your resume, if you didn't include a portfolio, if you didn't include a cover letter, I've heard all kinds of crap on LinkedIn about cover letters aren't important, this isn't important, that isn't important. As a hiring manager, I can tell you that it is all important. If you have a job you really want, make the whole package. Spend the time on it, put it all together because you want to make sure that first you don't get eliminated, which is going to be hard because AI systems, ATS, that is first hurdle. You don't want to get eliminated, But let's say you don't get eliminated. The thing that's going to keep you in the game is that you have a good package to present yourself, right? And that you can back it up. If you get on an interview, you can back up what you've shared. So it's not just a pretty portfolio. It's not just having a cover letter. It's not just any of these things. It's, is it all together? And if I get on a call with you in the first 3 or 4 minutes, can you speak to it? If I pulled up your portfolio, can you tell me why you built this the way you did? Can you tell me why you made this decision? Can you tell me why this is such low contrast in your vibe coded project, right? Why is that? Why am I looking at this, right? So these are the types of things that as a hiring manager, I can quickly tell you whether or not this is somebody that's going to work well on our team. And those are the types of things that on the hiring manager side that people are typically looking for, assuming you can get past the robots. And I cannot stress enough how much we have to acknowledge that right now, right? I know that this is a nightmare right now to try to get past the bots. And I don't know that anybody has an answer to that other than Sean mentioned thinking about what keywords are in those job postings and trying to match it up. I wanted to throw this out for a second to Brian, Jeff. What are some of the things that you find are challenging when putting together a portfolio specifically? What are some of the things that, just thinking about kind of the state of our industry and technology, what are some of the things that might make this challenging? This part.
Just some thoughts on my side. I know one thing that has helped me as an employee to get discovered has been sharing and sharing content. And so that's how Amazon actually found me, is because through my YouTube channel, a recruiter reached out to me and said, "Hey, we have this job available. Are you willing to apply for it?" And I'm not at Amazon anymore, but that's the reason why that I kind of found it. So what I always suggest to people that are looking for jobs is to share what they're doing. And the portfolio part is a good way to be able to share that. And with the tools that we have for vibe coding, a portfolio is not an extremely complex type of page that you're building. A lot of it's just here's a demo, here's some images, and here's some things like that. But I think what helped me with the Amazon interview was I had examples to show, and I was able to walk through those examples. And they did ask me those questions like what Sean was talking about. And I just walked through my process. But it also, so having a portfolio built wherever you can, there's a lot of different places you can use to build them. But having those different examples and those different courses and different links and things to different interactions that you've built, I think are key. And I don't know if I went off your question there, but that's just some thoughts that I have.
No, I
Uh,
think that I think that's perfect, Jeff. I think that it's a really good point, and I think that talking about the examples, like having the portfolio to show, that's a spot check. I can look at it and be like, anybody who's doing this job on a regular basis or has a team of folks that are doing this job, I can look at it and say, that was built in Rise. That was built in Story. This was built in Captivate. You can just kind of tell from things most of the time, or this was vibe coded. Like
yeah,
people know, you can kind of tell by looking at it. That's not what folks are looking for necessarily. Yes, can you use industry tools? Sure. But we all know that if you can use an industry tool, you can kind of use all of them. That's
yeah.
really the less important part, even if you're a developer. The more important part is what decisions are you making around interaction design and like how you've built it. And I think that to your point, Jeff, like if I'm applying for a job, let's say as an instructional designer, I don't think that me posting a built e-learning module is actually the thing that would be most effective in my portfolio. It's probably a storyboard. It's probably a design document with here's the what I was building, here are the learning objectives, here's what I was designing and why. Here was my goal, my intended outcome, here's the data that I wanted to collect. That little synopsis of a project is actually far more effective than popping a Rise templated module into a tool somewhere. So I
Yeah, I
think
think
that, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think with vibe coding, people tend to think, oh, I don't have to have the skills. And I had a conversation not too long ago with Mel Milloway, and she put it really well. It enhances my skills. So AI will enhance my skills, but I still have to have those skills. So I still have to have instructional design skills to be able to direct it in the right way. And I think that's what people are looking for. is how can you use AI to enhance the skills that you have? So for me, I have web development skills. I've always been more on the development side of things, but now AI can enhance those skills and give me superpowers, but I still have to know the components and the different elements. So it's not to say vibe coding is essentially is going to remove the need to have those skills, but it's going to enhance those skills. So I think being able to show those skills, whatever, if you're in the development realm, instructional design realm, being able to show those skills in your portfolio, I think is what's key to show you the employer what you bring to the table, basically.
100%. We were talking about that before we started the call today, is that I can go out and look at examples of things that people have vibe coded, and I can't read any of it because it's all so low contrast. It is a dark background with dark text, small font. I can't read it. So if you send me a vibe coded project and it's in that theme and I can't read the contrast, then I know you don't know what you're doing
Yeah.
because you didn't fix the contrast. It's not accessible. Nobody can read this. So I don't care that it took you 3 seconds. I don't care how flashy the colors are. I don't care how complex an interaction is. If I can't read it, then it doesn't matter. And so I think that your point, Jeff, about do you know what you're doing, right? If you know what you're doing, then you can use AI to build. I can build it in Claude. I can build it in whatever tool. They're all tools. These are all tools, whether they move faster or slower or whatever. It's just tools. So, do you have the skills to back that up? And I think that is becoming really apparent right now as folks start to vibe code things. Okay, so let's talk for a minute then about what are some of the pitfalls? What are things that we should avoid in a portfolio? So we know we want to have a good demonstration of work, good examples, be able to back it up, explain why you put together what you put together. What are some things that we should avoid? Any thoughts there?
I think especially in this AI-based world is be really careful of how you're coding it or how you're asking it to code it, that it's not looking like it's taking someone else's work. That has to be just extremely careful of that because you never know what someone else has looked at, who they've seen, who their friends are, who their colleagues are. If you go after that, yeah, you just need to be super careful with it.
Yeah, I have. So I know Jeff mentioned Mel Milloway earlier, Tim Slade, like they're folk, Kara North. These are all folks who share a lot, right? And all of us on this call too. We all share a lot online openly and get our work gets copied all the time. So if you're putting together a portfolio and you're pulling components from something somebody's done, I think I was talking to Melissa Milloway not too long ago, and she's got a great portfolio site that she's developed, right? So she's vibe coded a lot of it. She's put together examples of her work. She reached out to me and she showed me somebody had copied everything she had done, even down to the tagline on her site, and it was exactly the same site with just somebody else's information on it. And you need to be careful about that stuff because you saw it and copied it, but you got to remember all the rest of us saw it too. And so you have to be super, super cautious about what you use in your portfolio. It needs to reflect things that you've done and you've created and
Yeah.
designed. And it's not saying that you can't learn from folks. That's not going to do you any favors.
What I find interesting is like there are template sites out there. There are things where they sell a template. So somebody could take that template and they could reuse it. So we could Rise itself, most Rise courses, Tim says this all the time. Once you've seen one Rise course, you've seen them all.
Yep.
It's like it's very templatized. And I don't think that's the problem. The problem is more of if you just do a direct copy. And so
Yep.
for in Mel's case, it looked exactly the same
Mhm.
wording, everything like that. So I think it's good to get inspiration from other people and see what other people have done, but then it takes your creativity. It's more about, okay, you going in there and doing something similar, but not exactly the same design. Bring your own flavor to it. And that's what really makes you stand out. It's not copying directly from somebody, especially a speaker that is really well known. It's basically just, okay, they've done that. Let me put my twist to this and create something else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like what is the we talk about this, Rob and I talk about this a lot from like being developed from a developer perspective, that coders and developers, they're not like just sitting down in front of a blank screen and then typing code, right? There are code bases that you pull from to put together a combination of coding that is accomplishing your goal. And it's the same thing in design. I have this problem that I'm trying to address, something that I'm trying to support people to be able to do. And so I'm going to go out to my toolkit and say, I need this and this. And I'm going to pull these things together and this will be able to help this person. So when we're putting together portfolios, it's not about, there are elements of development and design decisions that you make visually, but it's mostly going to be how did you address a problem? And what choices did you make to do that? And so I need to know what the problem was that you were trying to solve, what were you trying to tackle, and how did you do it? So I think those are some important components. Okay, let's talk a little bit about actually putting together the portfolio then. A couple of things when it comes to portfolio design. We talked about representing your work, right? Making sure that it's representing something about you, something that you are able to do. And you might not be able to share things that you've done in real life. So you might have to make your own project from scratch. You might have to make something up. This is a place where AI could be helpful, right? Actually, Mel Milloway, I know we've talked a lot about her in the last few minutes, but she does this a lot. She makes up these fictitious use cases and uses AI to come up with these stories about here's the problem that I could potentially solve, and then figures out here's how I might address that and show how I could support that with training and performance support. That's really cool. So maybe that's something that you use AI to help you with if you need to create a new project, to come up with the story and how you might tackle something that's not in your real work. But I wanted to ask, what are some of the things as we're getting started? You're getting started to put it together, your portfolio. What are some of the things that we need to include? So it needs to be a representation of what you're applying for. If you're applying for instructional design, you need to have something that represents that. If you're a developer, that. If you're a visual designer or you're doing UX or UI, maybe it needs to be an example of that. Where are we going to be including this information? So for anybody on the call who has recently been applying for jobs, have you noticed that there were any challenges to where you put a portfolio, or whether somebody has a place for you to provide one? Any thoughts there?
I'll speak up for this one. I think the biggest thing is that being able to share different kinds of content in one place. I've done WordPress sites for 20 years, and that's always the place that I always put that stuff. The problem with launching e-learning content or different kinds of source materials or anything that I've, whether it's storyboard or anything like that, launching that stuff out of a WordPress site or off of a vibe coded website that has links or things like that, it's going to be a little bit different, or may not launch because it's a SCORM file, or a lot of my old work was all SCORM. A lot of stuff was Flash back in the day. So it's like, how do you take stuff like that and then make it something that somebody can review in a PDF or on a web page or something like that, and then put it all in one place? A lot of it gets kind of clunky that way. So that's just because this is an XCL call. That's a good use case for XCL because I can put old SCORM files in there. I can put a PDF in there. I can put a video tutorial that I did. I can put basically any kind of content that I've ever created and launch it through the same place, get that tracking, but also just launch it very easily. They don't have to see anything. They don't have to have a second pop-up window that you used to get with other tools that you could launch SCORM content from. Things like that. So just making it as simple as possible for people to see the work that you've done within some context. So going back to having a page that gives some detail to what you did on that project. So I think that's part of it. I think I've run into a problem where a lot of the stuff that I created was proprietary. So I couldn't share the actual project. And so I could take some screenshots or I could describe it, but all that again is not in a nice little package, right? So putting that into something that I can launch in a just PDF explanation, making sure that's accessible, things like that. But I think the challenges that I've run into have been, how do I get the actual content to show for everybody?
And I think that to your point, Brian, one of the things that you may end up doing is de-identifying a project. So saying, here's a project I worked on, and then you just de-identify it. You say, I was working in a manufacturing company. This was the problem that we were trying to solve. Here's the situation that we were dealing with. Here's how I addressed it. And so you're pulling out a lot of the pieces in order to still tell the story, but without sharing anything that you're not allowed to share. And maybe you can't share the actual project itself, the built project itself. So then how do we do that in a different way? So it may be that you don't even have that file anymore and you have to recreate something else to demonstrate that skill. So going back to what are you trying to present? If I'm trying to say I can do instructional design, a good design document or synopsis is one thing. And then if I'm also responsible for building e-learning or PowerPoint, or maybe I'm going to be a classroom facilitator or facilitating synchronously on Zoom or Teams or something like that. Can you do a facilitator guide? Can you build a PowerPoint? What are the things that you would be doing in that role based on the job description? And can I give you a couple of samples of how I design things based on what I'm going to be doing in that job? So all of those things are important. Going back to what Brian said, how do I share that information? That's where I think we'll take this now. And I'm going to do a little demo, and then I'm going to ask back in this group, what are some of the ideas that you have about how you might package this up based on what you're trying to share? I'm going to just share my screen and share XCL. So this is Build Capable XCL. I'm going to do just a quick demo of how to use XCL. And today at the end of the session in the handout, you do have a link to access the XCL Sandbox, which is a free account that you can use to share your portfolios and track the data. The data does get dumped periodically, so you'll want to check it every day just to see if anybody's been looking at your portfolio in case that data gets wiped. So it's not something, you can't use the sandbox for real projects in real life, but you could absolutely use it to track your portfolio, whether somebody's been looking at your job applications. What I'm showing you right now is XCL, and when you get on the landing page, there are only a few things that you do in XCL. This is a completely headless system. So you can use XCL instead of a learning management system. So instead of hosting courses on SCORM Cloud or making somebody register for an account or putting them in a Dropbox or Google Drive, you can actually host your any kind of content using XCL. And the goal is to create a link to your content, and in this case, a link to your portfolio. So what we're going to do here is just create an example link. There are brand templates in XCL that you can create your own brand identity. So let's say that you have a logo or you want to use your own color palette or something like that. You can set up your own settings in XCL depending on what account level you have. And then you have these links. And the link is what we're going to create today in order to later check our analytics dashboard and see whether somebody's been using those links. So I'll go ahead and go to the learning links, and I am going to create a new link. And it's super simple. If I'm going to create my portfolio, I'll just give it a name and I'll just say Sarah's portfolio. This is going to be just for me only. So this link name is just for me. Nobody's going to see that. And then I'm going to apply my brand template. I'll just use our regular brand template. But one thing I wanted to let you know about brand templates is you can decide what information you want to collect about that person who's accessing your portfolio. And this is very different than how LMSs work. So if you're hosting your portfolio on your website, you're probably not going to know if anybody's looked at it unless you've got some kind of web analytics. If you're hosting your portfolio on SCORM Cloud, you're going to make somebody go create an account to access the portfolio, right? Or if you have an LMS or something like that. In XCL, you can decide what you want to collect. So I could collect like name and email address. I can make it required or not. I could also collect data anonymously and completely bypass collecting any data about the person. One of the things that I suggested for creating portfolios is maybe you just want to add the company name. So maybe I'll create a template of settings. Actually, let me go back and do that real quick because it's pretty easy. Maybe I create one and I'll just say this is for portfolios. This is going to be template settings for my portfolios. So I have my own little template just for portfolios. I'm going to use the inbuilt LRS, which is just where the data is going to go. And so I can change the logo and background color. I'll leave this way, but obviously you can modify it with color and logo the way you want. But I can decide what fields I want to collect. So maybe what I do is instead of asking about the hiring manager's name or email address, maybe I turn all this stuff off and I just use this last field and say company name, because I can relabel these fields. And then I can see, is this, turn all that off, what company actually accessed my portfolio? And I can decide whether that information is required or not. And all of this, y'all, depends on what your goals are when you're applying to jobs. Let's say I have a job that I really want to get with a certain company, and I've put together my application and my portfolio, and I want to know if that company has accessed my portfolio. I can decide to make that company name required or not. Or I could ask for that person's name, or I could just make it anonymous and say, I don't want them to put anything in. I just want to know if anybody's looking at my portfolio. So you can decide what you want to do based on your goals, but this brand template of settings, that landing page, is customized for you. So unlike a typical LMS, you can decide what you want to collect about what people are viewing your portfolio projects. So I'm actually going to just leave this like this for right now so that we have one for it. All right, going back to my link, which was my portfolio link, I bailed out of that. So let's go back to this. So Sarah's portfolio. And then I will take that new one that I just created, which is my portfolios template. So there's my landing page that it's going to apply to it. And then I would put the name of my portfolio for this link. So one of the things that you could do is I could say portfolio. So I could say Sarah Mercier portfolio. And I could just make it as simple as that. Or I could say what the example is. I might say this is a data example, or I might say it's a storyboard example. What I would recommend doing, y'all, is don't name it the name of your project. So if it was like, I don't know, new hire compliance training, I probably wouldn't put that in there. Think about who you're sharing this with. So you're sharing this with a hiring manager, and what are you trying to demonstrate? So this portfolio example is demonstrating my storyboarding skills or my data skills or my e-learning, an example, an articulate storyline or whatever. So think about when you're giving it a title, what you're trying to demo to the person who's looking at that portfolio piece. That's just my own recommendation. You can obviously do whatever you think is best. Okay, so I will go ahead. I'm going to just do micro learning example for this one. And so I've got my little example. I can say, please enter your company name. Please enter your company name. So I can decide what I want this instructional text to say on that landing page. So the person who opens my portfolio piece, what do I want to say to them? And I can customize everything on this page. All right, I'm going to go on to creating my link. Now, this is the point where I'm going to upload my portfolio piece. I might upload a storyboard. In this case, I'm going to do a little micro learning example, but I can decide what I want to load up. I want to go back to something Brian said a few minutes ago. One thing you might choose to do here is create just a PDF of lots of examples in your portfolio. So you might have screenshots of e-learning, a storyboard example, a design document, some, learning objectives, whatever, a project synopsis. Maybe you put together a PDF portfolio that has just screenshots and examples in it. And that PDF could even have links to other things inside of it, right? So there are a lot of different things you could do here. It doesn't have to just be uploading e-learning. That is what I'm going to do in just a minute, but it doesn't have to be that. It could just be a PDF portfolio or any other of the content type that's here. So I'm going to go ahead and add in an example. Let me just pull this off the top. I'm going to pull something off my desktop. I'm going to grab a video. I've decided to do something different at the last minute just because I want to show you something. So I'm going to pop a video in here. And then because I dropped a video in here, it's asking me for a caption file. So I'm going to upload that closed caption file too, because I happen to have that on my desktop. So I'm going to drop in my sample and then publish that link. At this point, I can preview it and see what data comes through just to test everything, make sure it's working well. I'm going to go ahead and publish it, get my confetti. Now, at this point, I have my portfolio project. And if you're on the call or you're watching this live, you can scan this QR code. It's already live. This QR code, I would probably pop that onto my resume. That link I would probably also put onto my resume, right, in the portfolio section. Or if in the application process, as you're applying for the job, if there's a place to load a portfolio or add a link to a portfolio, then that's a great place to pop this link right here. So you've got a link and a QR code, use it however you want. I would probably put it a couple of different places so it's accessible no matter where that hiring manager looks. Okay, so once that's done, I have the information I need. When I'm done with this, and I'm going to just pop this link into the chat as well. So once you have this in here, now you can go in and share this out with folks, and then I can start to see, is anyone viewing my portfolio? So at this point, I've applied for the job, and then probably once a day, I want to go in just for my sanity, probably not more than once a day, but I want to go in and see, has anyone looked at my portfolio today? So I can go in here and I can go over to my analytics dashboard. And on your dashboard, obviously this is my account, so I have a lot of links, but I could go in and add that link for my portfolio. So there's my portfolio link. And then I can go in here and just see at a glance how many people have opened this portfolio and how many people completed it, which means they got to the end. Now, it depends on what type of content it is. If that was a SCORM file or XAPI, then it would track it just like e-learning. And I would be able to go in and see who has viewed this and did they finish it. If it was a PDF portfolio, then it would tell me, did they get all the way to the end of the PDF? So this is giving me at a glance who's looked at my portfolio. I can have a quick little report of who's been in my application. The other thing that I can go to is my activity stream in the analytics section, and I can see everything that somebody's done. So if I'm about to apply, I'm just using this example because it's in here. Thanks, Jacob, for this data. So Growth for All is the company that's here in my activity stream. I know Growth for All has gone in and looked at my portfolio piece, which was a video. And so I know that they went in and they played it, they skipped around, completed it, paused, so forth. Before I go into my interview with them, I know that they've actually been in there and been around and playing around with it, right? So this is really interesting. Another thing that I wanted to share, another way that you might do this, is something Rob and I talked about the other day. And that is, you could have a link that you create for each job that you apply for. So let's say that I've applied for three jobs. I applied for, I'm just going to pick big companies. So I applied for Amazon, I applied for Microsoft, and I applied for, I don't know, LinkedIn. I'm just going to throw something out there. So of those three jobs that I applied for, I created three separate portfolio links. Same portfolio, but I know that I gave this link to Amazon and I gave this link to Microsoft. I could make those links completely anonymous and not make them type in their company at all. So I could just name the link itself instead of calling it Sarah's portfolio. I could go in and call this, I'm going to edit it. So this is going to be Sarah's portfolio for Amazon, right? And then instead of using that portfolios template, let's just say I use like an anonymous bypass template. So they're never going to see this page. It's just going to pass it. And then Now, whenever I open this up, I'll open that up, and it completely bypassed the landing page. So it went straight to my portfolio. But here's what's cool. I now can go back over to that data, and I can now see, oh, sorry, let me go to my activity stream. I can now see that it was the Amazon link that got launched. And so that Amazon link got launched. And even though it was anonymous user, I know that link got launched. And I know it had to have been Amazon because that was the only person I gave that link to, or that was the only place I applied to. So there are a lot of different ways you can do this, y'all. If you're wanting to track whether or not people are looking at your portfolio, it kind of depends on your strategy. What do you want to collect about the person, if anything? It might be something that you want to demo, that you are setting this up in a unique headless way, right? That you are using XCL to share a portfolio project, which is very different than Dropbox or something else, right? So this could also be a differentiator for you as a learning professional, that you know how to use different learning technology to share portfolios and things like that. So there are a lot of different strategies that you can use in sharing your portfolio, but I wanted to take a moment now that I've gone through a demo and take questions or additional comments from the group. What are some things, now that we've kind of talked about potential ways to demo this, any other thoughts that you have or questions?
I think just taking that link and putting it on your portfolio is key. So that it's going to give you a lot of data, like what you showed, and you can at least see if they've clicked on it. But then if you're vibe coding, to go back to that, you can just take that link inside of your portfolio and just say, here you go. So here's one sample project, and then use on this button, link it to this page. So
Right.
it's extremely easy to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think having the link and the QR code both gives you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
But you could, Jeff, to your point, you could actually create links to each of your portfolio pieces. Maybe you have a video and an e-learning or whatever. Maybe you only give that hiring company, or on your application, you just have one link to a PDF that has all those links inside of it, right? And
Yeah.
those could all be links too. Those could all be XCL links too that are all trackable. So it could be very meta as far as
Yeah.
how deep you go in your tracking. All right, so I'm going to pull something from the LinkedIn Live comments. So Stacy had a comment or a question: if I already have a Wix portfolio site but want to be able to use all of the activity reporting, can I still use this to do it? And the answer is yes. So like Jeff just mentioned, you would create your link to your portfolio, whatever pieces that you wanted to track. So let's say that you have a site that you've built in Wix or whatever, and you want to add some e-learning samples to your portfolio site. You can just create those XCL links and pop those into Wix, your button. So this is an example of a storyline module. And then whenever somebody clicks that button from your Wix site, it's going to launch through that XCL link, and it's going to collect all the data the same way. That's the cool thing about having a headless system. I know this is kind of like jargony terminology, but a headless system means that you get all of the capabilities that you would of tracking in a learning platform, but without anybody having to create a login. Nobody has to actually log in to collect those data. So it's really cool. Great question. Let's see. So I do think that one of the things that comes up a lot, as we wrap up for today, one of the things that comes up a lot is asking, should I make a website? Do I need to make a full website landing page? And in my experience, it depends on what you're applying for. Are you applying for a job where you're creating websites? Then yes, I think you need to have a website. If you are applying for an instructional design position, I'm not looking at whether or not you can create websites. I'm looking at whether or not you can do instructional design. So I think it depends on what you're applying for. There are a lot of academies and people that have a lot of opinions about what you should create. And all I can speak from is being a hiring manager. And hiring managers are looking for whether you are a good fit for a certain position that they have available. So what you present depends on the job description and what somebody is actually looking for. Now, Do you get bonus points for being like way more creative and innovative than other people? Maybe. Can you create a website and having that extra skill? Could that be something that's valuable to a hiring manager? Potentially. But does that mean that you need to go learn how to do that in order to apply for a job for which you would not be doing that as a typical day-to-day thing? I don't think that's important. I think it's more important to present as a strong candidate for the role that you're applying to. So, any other thoughts around like building websites or what to create in a or add to a portfolio, what to avoid? Any other last thoughts there?
I'd
All
say
right.
if anything, I agree with you, but if anything, a portfolio can also be a location for all of the different examples that you have done. So if anything, it's just for me, it keeps me organized. And
Yes.
so it allows me to, okay, these are samples in case I need to show it. If I'm going into the interview, I just go right to my portfolio and show, okay, here's what I did for this, here's what I did for that. But yeah,
Exactly.
it depends on the job. If you're just doing instructional design, you may not need to show development stuff. But if you're doing development, you're going to need to show what you can do with development.
That's exactly right. And then Jeff, I do want to go back to what you mentioned earlier too, is that's one way that people may find you. If you have a if you're a content creator, if you have a YouTube channel, if you are working out loud on a regular basis, then people might find you and ask you to come apply for a job.
Yep.
Or they may come to you and ask you to do work for them. So if that is a skill that you have or something that is exciting to you, then and that's a space that you want to work in, then that is something that is valuable, right? Jeff just recently put out a video about all of the video tools that he has in his studio. It is very in depth. I watched it and as a techie nerd person, I was overwhelmed. I was like, there's no way I ever have this level of studio. But that's the thing that Jeff is into. And guess what? When I want to have a good production quality video, like a short explainer video or something, you know who I call? I call Jeff and say, hey, can you make a video for me? Because I know that he's got the setup and I know that's a thing that he's into. And so think about what you want to do. If you don't want to do YouTube stuff, you probably shouldn't go making a YouTube channel, because if you do, then people are going to say, oh, they're really good at that. And that's what they're going to be asking you to do all the time. So be thinking about what you actually want to do in a job as well. It might be helpful. But I think that going back to having a place to stay organized, maybe that's your LinkedIn page, right? Maybe it's just a document that you have that you share with people. You don't have to build a website. There's value to it and it's a strategy, but you have to think about what you're trying to accomplish. If you're applying for jobs, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a website, but you do need to have a place to keep all your stuff together. I actually had someone come apply to a job with me when I was at the task force, and he had done research on me. And he came in with a stack of paper of all of these webinars and articles I'd written and everything. And he's, oh, I was researching you before this interview. And I was very impressed about his research skills. But when he left, I was like, can I have that? Because he had a better collection of my history than I did. And so I think it's important to be thinking about, as you go, even if you're not looking for a job right now, how can you keep track of your professional career, right? And the things that you've done, because you never know when that next job might show up that you really do want to go and apply for and be part of. Having that history is super important. So if it helps you to have a place to stay organized, try to think about what that place will be, because it will certainly come in handy.
Just want to add something to that really quick before we close out. And I said, do think it's good for you to own your web presence and your content. So I do think it's worth at least having a domain, having some things that you own, because platforms go away, algorithms change, all that stuff. And the things like XCL or portfolio links or anything you do, you can share on LinkedIn, but I think you need to own it and have your own presence, because stuff goes away. And being able to point somebody to the same place over and over again is important. It doesn't have to be a website. It could just be a one-page thing that is at that URL. So you don't have to build out a big website, but owning your content and owning your space, I think, is important.
I think that's a really good point, and thanks for bringing that up. I would expect no less from you, Brian. But just making sure that you think about where you're posting stuff. I know there's been a trend of folks writing content on LinkedIn. So starting those LinkedIn newsletter things owns that content. So you have to be very careful about what are the things that you're agreeing to, the terms you're agreeing to before you share a bunch of content, especially now in AI land. If you're just publishing stuff out there, once you put it out there, you don't own it anymore, depending on where you're posting it and how you're using it. Protect your own IP as well. And here recently, there are a lot of things that have been going away and data and content that's been lost. So having backups can be something to consider as well. All right. This has been an awesome exclusive. I really appreciate everyone joining. Thanks, Annette, for your comments in here about Canvas, where they had public pages for free accounts. You still have access to the content, but but can make it longer, make it public by sharing a link. Yeah, so that's the thing you have to consider, is that as people's terms and things change, there's a lot of, to Annette's point, there's a lot of things that happen in the software and the tech industry where they get you hooked with a free account, right? They get you hooked with a free account and they're like, hey, yeah, build all your stuff here. And then once you're in their ecosystem, they're like, okay, now that's going to be at the low price of $20 a month, now $50 a month, now whatever. Now we're deprecating this feature. So you have to start to think about what is the longevity of this, and do you have it in another format or a backup of it? And that's one of the things that I like about simplifying this process. Have your content, own it, put it in a PDF, get some screenshots, tell the story. The story is the piece. The story is the important part. So if you're sharing an XCL, great, share it, track your data, delete it out when you are done, right? Just keep control of your stuff and track back these folks that are tracking you. See where you're getting traction. Y'all know that at Build Capable, we're huge data nerds. We believe that if you are going to know whether or not you've been effective, you have to have some data to show. And so this applies to applying for jobs as well, right? Are you getting traction? In the absence of any data, how do you know? How do you know if you're being effective in your job search? So just something to consider. All right. I promised I would share a resources link. I'm going to pop that in the chat and all the places. If you are on LinkedIn, you will have it there as well. So I'm going to share this link of resources and the QR code. I'll share that here live as well. So that way it's in the recording in case you all want to grab it later from the recording on YouTube. This is your link to the portfolio resources. And some of the things that we got from this resource curated list. One is going to be access to the sandbox. So let me open these sessions. And this is also an XCL link, right? So we're going to see how many people access it. So in these resources, you'll find that there's access to the XCL Sandbox. That's going to be free access. You don't have to have a credit card or anything like that. You can upgrade your account later if you choose to, but you don't have to. There's a video from Megan Torrance's group about some portfolio tips. Josh Cavalier gave us an AI prompt library and some resources from his Applying AI book. Jeff's video here on SCORM wrapping vibe coded content. So if you vibe code something that you want to then pop into XCL, there's a video that you can use. So you don't even need to pay for an authoring tool. You can just vibe code it, wrap it, pop it into XCL and track it. There's a link for 50% off of art school from the folks at Maestro. Kara North has this community called Monthly 60, which is free. And this is a great community to be part of as you are engaging in your job search. So she wanted to make sure that got shared out with the community. And then Kara and JD are both folks to follow on LinkedIn if you're actively in a job search, because they post curated jobs that are relevant to the learning and development community. So these are some things that will be helpful for you as resources as you are in your job search. And we want to wish you all the best in your job search, in your portfolio. If you have any feedback to share with us as you're using this in your job search, we would love to hear from you, and we hope that this has been helpful. Next month in our exclusive, we are going to have a couple of guests that are talking about data. So Megan Torrance is going to be joining us from Torrance Learning, and Wendy Morgan will be joining us from UNC. We're going to be talking about data and XAPI next month, which is a fun topic, one of my favorite topics. So we will see you all soon for our next exclusive. Thank you all so much for joining.